Was English the same as we know it today, or has it evolved from something that cannot be comprehended by modern readers?
Ysawaddu that, brother Athelstan. Ysawaddu hit. Sagamensta tu het Kisawa. Yeza, brother. It's hit Kisawa.
To something that we so fluently use today at every corner of the globe?
And then we have a chocolate cake that's infused with chocolate, served with chocolate ice cream and a molten chocolate topping.
Behind every English word and phrase, there is a story, perhaps going back thousands of years or simply to last year. So, what is the story of English? You might have heard people say that no other language is as rich and vibrant as English. It is a bubbling stew of influences from the influxes of peoples into the island of Britain. From the Celts, Romans, Anglo-Saxons, Vikings, and Normans of distant history to the Jews, West Indians, and Asian peoples of more recent times. Once passive to imperialism itself, in more modern history, Britain has led with the policy of overseas expansion, spicing up the language with tastes from distant lands such as India, China, Iran, South Africa, and Japan. There are also English speaking countries which are historically close to Britain, such as the USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa.
So you're Australian.
That's right, mate.
So when's your birthday?
15th of bloody May 1989.
Is he speaking in an Australian accent? Sounds like it.
So let's dive deeper into the history of English. More than 6,000 years ago, around the Black Sea, among the inhabitants of the edge of what is now Eastern Europe and Asia, a new language stirred. It was the genesis of what you are reading now, English. Few traces of that prehistoric people, and none of their writing remain. But the language, now known as Indo-European, has developed into what is today spoken by between 350 and 400 million people. English is the world's most common second language and only outstripped as a first tongue by Chinese. This global popularity brings many new influences to bear on English and constantly expand its vocabulary.
Call it complisalt, part compliment, part insult. He invented them. I coined the term. See what I just did there? That was an explanabrag.
All began with the journey to Europe. The existence of Indo-European can be supported by the evident similarities between most European languages and some Asian ones such as Persian and Hindi. English words echo with these primeval origins. The word feather, for instance, can be traced back thousands of years to a root shared by Latin penna, meaning feather, Greek pteron, which is wing, and even patra, which meant wing in ancient Indian Sanskrit. Around 2000 BC, Indo-European split into branches, one of which was Germanic. The Germanic-speaking peoples moved from their homeland to northern Europe. Those who settled to the north laid the foundations for the Scandinavian languages, and the western branch spoke what became German and Dutch. Later, the overseas adventures of these people would have a huge impact on Britain, its inhabitants, and how they spoke. Let us learn about these invaders from over the sea. At the time of these Germanic movements, the people of Britain spoke Celtic languages, the ancestors of Welsh and Gaelic. A little survives in place names derived from Celtic words such as Penno, which means a hill or a headland. This ancient Celtic world was turned upside down in AD 43 when the Emperor Claudius sent an expedition that established a Roman presence in Britain lasting until the early 5th century. when the troops were finally recalled to a Rome under attack from the Goths. Roman roads, villas, fortifications were left behind, but not much Latin remained, except in place names such as Portsmouth and Lincoln. With the Romans gone, the Britons, speaking the Celtic tongues that had survived the occupation, were attacked from the north by Picts and Scots and decided to look abroad for help. Their king, Vortigern, invited the Germanic speaking Saxons from across the North Sea to come and settle strategic parts of England, and they landed near Ramsgate in Kent in AD 449. Soon, Angles, Saxons, and Jutes from parts of modern Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands were taking over the land and spreading their language. This is when English started to take shape. By the end of the 7th century, this language, which we now know as Old English, had carved out its own identity. There were many dialects, of course, but the ones spoken in southern England or Wessex, the kingdom of the West Saxons, became the main form when Alfred the Great began to unite England in the 9th century. The majority of the words we use most frequently and the basic elements of nearly any sentence date from this time. Old English words tend to be short and express simple concepts such as the, to, be, a, from, and with. The common nouns include thing, time, man, year, and day, and verbs, for instance, be, do, say, get, and have, are all Old English. Fragments of Old English can still be read and understood, but it has many distinctions from modern English. Grammar and word order are different, and Old English had three letters we no longer use. The letter ash, which resembled the combination of the modern letters A and E, sounded similar to the vowel sound of cat. The letter thorn, pronounced like the th in thin, and eth, like the in leather. Further, there were these compounds called kennings in Old English, which were usually made up of two words, and some of which were quite interesting. A ship, for instance, might be called a wag flota, that is, wave floater, or sahingest, sea steed, while the sea might be called ron raid, or whale road. The Anglo-Saxon or the Old English dominated to such extent that few Celtic words entered Old English. It is a mystery whether the Celtic Britons were driven out or simply had their language replaced, but it was certainly pushed to the margins of the British Isles to Scotland, Wales, Cornwall, and the Isle of Man. However, Latin staged a small revival. This was when monks arrived from Rome to spread Christianity, headed by the mission of Saint Augustine, which landed in Kent in the year 597, followed by the arrival of Saint Aidan in the north at Lindisfarne around the year 635. These missionaries imported words of a religious nature such as amen, candle, and hymn. Old English was strongly influenced by the Old Norse, a language spoken by the Vikings from Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. These Vikings set sail to attack the south and the east of England at the end of the 8th century. The conflict continued over the control of Britain until Alfred the Great agreed to a treaty with their leader Guthrum in the year 886, which established the Danelaw. Consequently, an area of England was subject to Danish laws that covered what is now East Anglia, the East Midlands, and the north up to the River Tees. Scandinavians survive in place names such as the ones ending in B, Rugby and Grimsby, for instance, which are the Old Norse words for town and farmstead. Some other Viking words introduced to Old English include arrow, bull, cross, fellow, outlaw, and wrong. The later years witnessed a French flavor in English.
Smell it. Mmm, smells nice. Finger in, lick it. Tastes nice. Lift the jug and drink a bit. Oh, this is good. This is.
England was about to change for centuries to come. In the year 1066, the Normans from France invaded England, giving rise to the new French influenced medieval or Middle English, which is much easier for us to understand than Old English. If you will read Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, written at the end of the 14th century, you will find that many phrases and sentences will read just like oddly spelled modern English. Geoffrey Chaucer was the first great English poet and also regarded as the father of English literature. His renowned work, Canterbury Tales, is a cycle of linked stories told by a group of pilgrims who meet in a London tavern before their pilgrimage to the shrine of St. Thomas. He introduced many words to English, including flute, harmony, jingle, laxative, magic, misery, munch, and nicety. For about 300 years, French was the language of the crown, and the nobility and thousands of French words flooded into English. Most in turn were derived from Latin. The way many words start and end date from this time, including many prefixes and suffixes. This Norman influx into English added new ways of saying the same thing, which is the reason that English has such a large vocabulary. For instance, in addition to asking, you could now also inquire or query. This French influenced Middle English was a hybrid language with many dialects and spellings, and no comprehensive dictionary to dictate standards. As London began to grow its influence as the capital, civil servants produced a large number of official documents, and the dialect of the southeast became more central. In the 15th century, there was a change in the pronunciation of many English words. It is also known as the Great Vowel Shift. Previously, the word fame was pronounced like farm, and the word fine was pronounced like fiend. The year 1476 changed not only English but the entire literary world, with effects still observed in the modern world. It was when William Caxton, an English merchant who had studied the art of printing in Cologne, set up a press in Westminster, London, and began printing books in English. English, which was previously limited in its accessibility, was now available for wide consumption, which led to more stability and order in its usage. This marked the beginning of early modern English, the language of Henry VIII, the Elizabethans, and Shakespeare. Early modern English also provided the English translation for the authorized version of the Bible or the King James Bible, which was used for more than 300 years in church and at home. A number of phrases were introduced by these works, such as a fly in the ointment, feet of clay, till death us do part. It was also the time of the Renaissance, a rebirth of learning, which flourished in continental Europe and was traveling gradually to Britain. Latin and Greek were regarded as the languages of intellectual pursuit, and many words were exploited from these to express new concepts such as chaos, democracy, encyclopedia, pneumonia, skeleton, and vacuum. Other contemporary European languages like French, Italian, and Spanish also provided a rich source of vocabulary as well as a channel for words from further, some of which include the words elegy, guitar, madrigal, minaret, ode, opera, optician, and zero. The following years were marked by the great age of exploration, accelerated by the first voyage of Christopher Columbus in the year 1492, which facilitated the development and import of words into English. This was the time when Europeans visited Africa, the Americas, and the Far East for the first time and brought back to the Old World novel products, and along with these, new names such as cocoa, chocolate, tobacco from South America and the Caribbean, and the banana from Africa. Contacts with North Africa and the Middle East provided a channel for Arabic words like alcove, harem, and hashish, as well as hod, kaftan, and yogurt from Turkish. Many Persian words such as bazaar, caravan, and turban, and the ones from Hebrew such as hallelujah and shekel were also introduced. From the 16th century onwards, in the midst of competitive European colonialism, Britain's trade and colonial expansion took English far beyond the shores of Britain. New varieties of English emerged, with first being American English, followed by others as the empire expanded to the Caribbean, Canada, Australia, Africa, and Southern Asia. English soaked up words from these new places, such as bungalow and pajamas from Hindi, ketchup and kotouing from Chinese, and boer and trek from Afrikaans. America soon unfettered itself from the host. After the independence from Britain in 1776, the American writer Noah Webster established the nation's own linguistic identity by producing his American Dictionary of the English Language in the year 1828. This featured many spellings that differed from the British ones, preferring simpler ones. This modification led to the standardization of the American English, which is still used today globally. It was by the year 1800 that English started to be recognized as truly modern. With notable authors such as Jane Austen, thousands of new words appeared with each passing year. The revolution in industry, science, and technology in England in the late 18th century brought new terms into light with the use of computers, internet, and mobile phones. Words like geek, icon, blog, podcast, texting, smileys, etc., are still being invented. Popular culture, along with slangs, provide a constant source of vocabulary, particularly among the young, since the birth of teenager in the 1950s. And increasing informality in modern life. Another aspect of English is democracy, the freedom with which journalists and advertisement copywriters invent words. They often use blends like adolescent, a middle-aged person with interest and clothing associated with adolescents. Docudrama, infotainment, and smog are among other examples. What's surprising is that more than half of the new words can be formed by the manipulation of the existing language.
And yeast infection. Like yeast?
With time, old words also gain new senses. In 1990s, a text message became a text and then transformed into a verb. In more recent times, this liberty with language has been increasingly observed in the United States with the rise of popular movements like the hip-hop music and the urban black street culture with terms like G or gangsta.
Called up the homies and I'm asking y'all, which part are y'all playing basketball?
Or OG, original. English is global in the 21st century. The language of internet, business, science, technology, air traffic control. American English has gained much more popularity with the wider reach in music, films and television, with varieties still emerging in the form of Hinglish, Japlish and Polglish. English is set to become ever more colorful. If you found the information helpful, like, share and subscribe, and stay connected for much more about English.